Thank you for streaming with us this morning. I'm Brad Edwards. It is 11:32 here, bottom of the hour. I want to talk about what happened just a short time ago in a Lake County courthouse courtroom, and that being the shooter, the Highland Park spree killer on July 4th, charged with 117 counts, went through what will really be his preliminary hearing. It was pretty basic, to say the least. 9 minutes in and out, 10:59 to 11:09. He spoke 14 times, said his birthday once, no once, and yes 12 times. Procedural but important nonetheless. I want to break it down with one of our legal eagles, our legal eagle, Irv Miller. Irv, you were not able to see it. It was quite a tight group. I think they kept it to. It was on Zoom. Any key takeaways from what took place?
Well, the only thing I was curious about is whether or not he would be present for it, or it would occur from Zoom from the jail. But apparently he was in the courtroom. Arraignments are pretty standard. There's not much variety about them. Typical arraignment is that his lawyer is given a copy of the charges. The defendant's asked if he understands what he's charged with, what the potential sentences may be, and at that time he enters his plea, which is 99.9% of the time it's a not guilty plea, which is what he entered in this particular case. The judge by law then has to tell him that if he doesn't show up for his court appearances, whether he makes bond, which he can't because he has no bond, but even if he escapes from the jail and he doesn't appear for court for his trial, he could be tried in his absence. And if he's convicted by a jury, he could be sentenced in his absence. Then the case is typically continued to a future date, which I believe is November 1st, where the discovery process begins, which is where the state has to turn over all their records, their police reports, their forensic information over to the defense attorney. And that will take many court dates before we get down to talking about a trial in this case.
Yeah, Judge Victoria Rossetti was very precise and expeditious in the manner of how she handled it. Again, it was 9 minutes, and you were right, Irv. It was interesting. Wasn't sure if we were going to see the charged, if we were going to see the defendant come out. He did come out. He was wearing dark, kind of typical jail garb. He was one of the only ones in the courtroom with a mask, covert procedures. Looked fairly slight in figure compared to the three other individuals that were standing right next to him, three individuals at the defense table. Will those be his defenders? Will those be his attorneys, or at least right now in the process, that's who he's drawn?
Well, right now, those are his lawyers, and it's my understanding those are attorneys from the Lake County Public Defender's Office. It's not unusual for more than one lawyer to step up on a homicide case, particularly when there's multiple victims involved in the charging documents. So I suspect those were three lawyers standing next to him. Will they stay on? It's not an individual public defender that's typically appointed. It's the public defender's office. So, they could decide down the road that some other attorney from the public defender's office could step in, or if possible, if it can be done, if he has the resources, he can hire a private attorney. And then the judge will grant the public defender's office permission to withdraw from the case and allow the new attorney to file an appearance in court, where that attorney will take over probably at that moment for the conclusion of the case.
Irv, since the gravity of this case, you obviously know that the state's attorney in Lake County, Eric Reinhardt, is going to throw every available asset at this case. You and I have spoken about Mr. Crimo, the defendant in the case. This isn't a cause celeb. This isn't some type of larger issue. This appears to be mass shooting motivated by hate from all appearances. So you've talked about, frankly, the unlikeliness that some private attorney will want to take him on. This isn't Kenosha, Wisconsin. We're not talking Second Amendment. This isn't Jesse Smollett, where there are other issues. This is a third rail anyone would want to avoid. So if he doesn't get a private defender, is there anyone in the public defender's office, could they also say, hey, I don't want to defend him?
They could go to their boss, the chief public defender, and say, just, I don't think I get, do a good job for this individual. He has the right to the best representation possible. You could say, I live in Highland Park, or I have friends in Highland Park, or I know somebody that was hurt in this particular case, and I have no doubt that they would reassign the case to some other public defender in the office that would be able to represent him. The bottom line is everybody's entitled to a legal defense, and lawyers, when we take another,
I've been employed
to uphold the law and do the best we can in court to represent our clients to the best of our ability. And attorney doesn't have to take the case, and we could ask leave to withdraw if there's something comes up during the case where we don't feel we could adequately represent the person. It happens all the time, frankly. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happened down the road. But right now it sounds like he has 3 public defenders standing next to him, defending him.
Yeah, and he does deserve the best defense as per the Constitution that is available to him. And we know, obviously, the Lake County State's Attorney will throw every possible asset they have at this case. We were just a minute ago looking at a picture of some of the victims in this case, 7 of them murdered July 4th morning, minutes after the beginning of what was small-town Americana 4th of July parade. 7 individuals murdered. I want you to go over this again. In the 117 counts, there are 7 who were murdered, but there are 21 counts of first-degree murder. Legally, how does that play?
And now that we actually have the indictment, and I've reviewed it, murder can be charged in different ways. There are different acts that you can commit that constitute murder. If somebody intends to kill somebody and does, that could be a charge of murder. If somebody knows his act could cause the death of somebody else, that could be another charge of murder. And thirdly, if somebody knows that their acts could create a strong probability of death to somebody, in other words, you don't intend to do it, and there's no knowledge that you're doing it, but the act in and of itself, you should know, creates a substantial probability that you're going to kill somebody or commit or involve great bodily harm, that could be a murder charge. So the State's Attorney of Lake County has decided to use all 3 branches of our murder statute at his disposal and tried them different ways. So a jury will be presented eventually, unless one of the 3 things is dismissed.
Irv, I'm going to cut you off just a minute. Irv, I'm going to cut you off just a minute. Appreciate that. We have someone at a podium speaking outside, I believe, the Lake County Courthouse right now. Let's take a listen. What is that temperature
like inside of them? You can speak to them a little bit. That's their son, but obviously did something so heinous. What's the temperature like? Are they separating themselves from their son?
No, not at all. I mean, as parents, they try to be as supportive as possible. You're talking about parents that had no idea of this ever occurring.
And why not hire a private attorney?
That question, I wouldn't be able to tell you that. That's a question I don't know.
Are your clients employed? And if they are, do you know what their jobs are?
That I won't disclose at the moment.
Is this correct? She lives in Highland Park and he lives in Highland?
That's
okay,
right.
I believe here whom we are listening to is an attorney hired by the family of the defendant,
Robert Jr., right?
Robert Crimo III. They were apparently in the courtroom today, so let's listen to what this attorney has to say.
No, Robert Jr., I know. So we call him Bobby, and then there's Bob. So the father lives in Highwood.
The mother, is her last name still Crimo?
No.
What is it?
Piscina. Yeah.
Can you spell that?
Should I show you something?
I'll have to go through my phone on that one.
Okay, and the residence of the defendant at the time on July 4th was Highland?
Correct.
So they're not together, but you represent them both?
Correct.
Have you heard anything about an insanity plea, anything to that nature? That's something that maybe...
Again, the defense, the strategy of the public defenders hasn't been disclosed at all to us at all. That's something that you would have to ask them.
So we're paying for his defense too, because he's getting a public defender now, right?
You know, everyone is entitled to a defense, and you know the judge assigned that.
How well do you know about it? Is this him?
I can't even see that.
That's 2020 Highland Park at a Proud Boys.
I understand, but I'm not willing to disclose that association. Again, we have no knowledge of that. Any more? We're good?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, could you say your first name again, please?
George Gomez, G-O-M.
Okay, that was George Gomez. So he doesn't represent the defendant in this case, the defendant being Bobby Crimo III, charged with 117 felony counts. But he apparently, and this is a new character we're being introduced to today, he represents the parents of the defendant. I don't know if he represents them jointly, but it sounded as if he represents both of them in some manner. Now let's bring Irv back in if we can. Irv, so now we know his family has hired an attorney, but typically in these cases, if a family hires an attorney not necessarily to represent the person charged with a crime, it's more of let's be frank, kind of a public relations, kind of a salvo to keep them out of the public eye and get a face out there to speak on their behalf, right?
Well, yes, you're absolutely right about that, but there's a difference in this case. And that is there's a serious question as to whether or not the Lake County State's Attorney intends to charge the father for some crime dealing with his basically endorsing his son getting an FOID card from the state of Illinois, and whether or not there's criminal culpability attached to that. So that would be my guess right now, that that's why they reached out to an attorney, because they think they need, particularly the father, may need some representation to deal with the Lake County State's Attorney's Office to try to get them not to charge the father with anything at this point in time.
Again, and the father may need legal representation, does not necessarily, but did vouch in essence for his son to get that FOID card, which allowed his son to legally buy the weapons he used, including the AR-15-like gun that he used on the morning of Independence Day at the parade in Highland Park to murder 7, that according to police, and injure dozens of others. 48 counts of attempted murder came down today. Irv, I want to ask you one more question.
To that, Brad,
yeah,
quick.
you can add to that, but also if you will.
This was not the first attorney that they reached out to. That is the family. They reached out to another attorney, and actually I talked about it on your air the day of, when he was arrested. And that attorney subsequently withdrew because he didn't feel it was appropriate for him to represent this defendant. And that's when this attorney stepped in at that time. And so that's a case where the attorney started to represent and decided to get off the case for obvious reasons.
Okay, so now this is attorney number 2 for the family, mom and dad, not even the defendant. Irv, let's say that this plays out and there are no criminal charges against dad for vouching for the FOID card that allowed for the purchase of. Could dad and mom, or both, if there's some proof that there was maybe prior knowledge, could they face some civil culpability here, meaning some type of monetary issue would be a civil case? Could that happen?
It could absolutely happen, a civil case, but that's not up to the Lake County State's Attorney to have any decision about. It's up to the victims basically decide if they want to file a lawsuit against the father, and it's a lower burden of proof. In a criminal case, it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In a civil case, it's lower. It's a preponderance of the evidence, like 51%, as opposed to proof beyond a reasonable doubt. But that's not a case where the prosecutor is there being paid by the county. It would be a case of the aggrieved person basically hiring an an attorney to represent them against the father.
Yeah,
or
but
mother.
yet another reason, though, for mom and dad, as we would say in the legal world, to lawyer up. Irv, I want to take a listen with you as we listen in, as those of you streaming with us listen in, to state's attorney, the head state's attorney of Lake County is an Eric Reinhardt. If you're not familiar with that name, you will certainly be hearing much more from him in the coming months as this case goes through the court system. He spoke, gave a press conference after today's 9-minute preliminary hearing. Let's take a listen to that.
Good morning. My name is Eric Reinhardt. I'm the Lake County State's Attorney. This will probably be our final press conference, barring until the matter is closed. I will not be discussing the evidence in the case, the investigation, or the specific details of charging decisions at this time. Today, the court formally apprised the offender in this case of the charges he is facing. He is facing 21 counts of first-degree murder. If he is convicted of murdering any 2 people, he will face natural life without the possibility of parole. Any sentence on the charge of murder is served under Illinois law at 100%. He was also arraigned on counts 22 through 69, which were attempt first-degree murder. If the allegation of great bodily harm is proven, then those 22 through 69 charges, I think that would be 48 charges, would carry up to natural life. 48 individual victims were named in the indictments. In addition to that, 48 counts of aggravated battery with a firearm were also charged, and those are at 6 to 30 years at 85%. I want to thank the entire Lake County State's Attorney's Office for its tireless work in this case so far. I want to continue to thank law enforcement for their work in this case. I want to give a special thank you to the victim specialists and our Chief of Victim Services in the Lake County State's Attorney's Office for their tireless work, their round-the-clock work to shepherd individuals through the legal process. The next court date will be November 1st. I will take a few questions, but I have to emphasize I will not be discussing the evidence in the case, the charging decisions, or the status of the investigation.
Should we make anything about the fact that they're not requesting a trial at this time?
They did not request a trial. I would refer you to ask them as to why they did that. We certainly want them to have time to look at the evidence.
Negotiations and whether you would actually expect this to go to trial?
No comment on that.
Mr. State's Attorney, could you explain how there were reports that he said when he was arrested that he did something?
No comment. I can't comment on that.
Are you still speaking regularly with U.S. Attorney John Lowe?
Yes.
Any update on whether there might be any federal charges or insight into that?
I do not have an update. I would refer you to him.
Right after the shooting.
Any more charges here at Lake County?
No comment.
After the shooting, there was 830 crisis counselors descending on Highland Park. And my question is, now we've been having shootings here in Lake County. Why haven't we had any crisis counselors come to Waukegan or North Chicago, Waukegan?
The question that Mr. McLemore asked, for those of you who didn't hear, was about the number of counselors who came to the Highland Park area as opposed to the ongoing gun violence that is occurring in Waukegan, North Chicago, Zion, other parts of Lake County. Mr. McLemore, I don't know the number of counselors, but I take your question to be why were there so many counselors sent here? The FBI and the Red Cross, as well as the state's attorney's victim specialists, did respond to the Highland Park scene with respect to the violence that we see, unfortunately, in Lake County. Our victim specialists, we have 12 of them. I'm happy to say that those numbers have expanded since I've become state's attorney. We have 12 victim specialists, and we respond to every single shooting in every single situation where we have a victim. The FBI and the Red Cross sent the people that they sent.
Can you just explain the technicality of 21 murder charges?
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to get too much into the details of it, but basically 7 people lost their lives. There are 3 alternative ways that we see in very many murder cases. There are 3 alternative ways to charge the offense of murder. That's why there are 21 counts. If you were to go to any murder prior to this proceeding, you would see that very typically there are 3. Sometimes there are 2, but most often there are 3.
Can you explain why that's done for those of us who don't
Sure. Generally speaking, the three types of murder are about what the person's mindset was. Excuse me. Did they intend to cause death? Did they knowingly cause death? Did they intend to cause great bodily harm that eventually led to the death? Did they knowingly cause bodily harm that led to the death? All of those can lead to murder. It has to do with the mindset. I'm speaking very generally under Illinois law.
Can you say anything about the discovery that you're turning over today?
No.
Can you explain again? It was up to his attorneys to demand a trial. I mean, what's going forward?
Generally speaking, under Illinois law, the defense may demand a trial, either in writing or orally. The defense did not do that today. That was what happened in the public courtroom. I'm not going to comment beyond that.
But that can happen at a later date.
Of course, yes.
You talked about his mindset. Any indication of a motive?
No, I'm not going to comment on that. And the question about mindset was generally how mindset is dealt with under Illinois law, not his.
Do any of the charges relate to the illegal possession or ownership of a firearm or illegal purchase of a firearm? And any of the charges relate to him doing anything illegal with that gun before he shot it?
The 117 counts that are on public record do not describe a weapons offense.
Can you talk about whether or not the parents could potentially face charges?
I will not comment on that.
Do you think any federal charges will come?
I would refer everyone to the U.S. Attorney's Office as to that question. I don't have any other comment on that.
Have you been in contact with John Locke?
Yes.
Is the defendant in any way cooperating with the investigation?
I'm not going to comment on that.
I'll take two more questions. Do you have a word for the victims?
Well, certainly our office continues to support them. I was touched. I was moved by the individual effort that our victim specialists have shown in this case and in all cases, even separate from this case. They do an unbelievable work. They are trained professionals. They are compassionate, and they reach out to every victim in every single crime, but particularly crimes of violence. Not just these cases, but in every single case that we have here in Lake County. And they've done an unbelievable job. Okay? All right. Thank you, everybody.
Okay, that was quick. Not a lot of information there for many reasons. That was the head state's attorney in Lake County, Illinois, Eric Reinhardt, basically said that's going to be the first and the last time we likely hear from him, at least in a press conference setting, until this case is adjudicated, which may be many, 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 many months. Irv Miller, want to bring back in our legal expert. Irv, anything you take from the press conference, and probably not a surprise that he says this is going to be the first and last, correct?
There's nothing he said that was a surprise. Totally could have anticipated every word that he said there today. He does not want to be in a situation to give the defense grounds to file a motion to dismiss the charges because of pretrial publicity and that the defendant can't get a fair trial at all. So he has to kind of watch himself as to what he says. You don't want to basically taint the jury pool. And right now that jury pool are the citizens of Lake County, Illinois. Certainly, I can't imagine any Lake County resident not knowing about the case. You're not entitled to a perfect trial, but you're entitled to a fair trial. And I think the state's attorney is aware of that, and he wants to make sure that he doesn't do anything that could potentially give the defense any ammunition to try to get this case dismissed for pretrial publicity.
Yeah, 12 of them will be sitting at home or working right now, unbeknownst to them. They could indeed be the ones who decide the fate of the Highland Park July 4th killer. Again, the prosecutor did also go over the 7 who died and the 3 charges of first-degree murder for each, which brings 7 times 3, 21 counts of first-degree murder. Irv, you talked about that intent. Could it kill? Probability it could kill. Really kind of a 3-pronged charge. But then he was very specific to say, not that he's talking about that specific case. Talked about, there were questions about motive too. We know authorities in the past, there's speculation of some type of hate here. We know Christopher Cavelli of the Lake County Major Crime Task Force said that the defendant here had some affinity towards the number of 4 and 7. Of course, it happening on 7-4. July 4th. None of that, though, needs to really be established. I mean, they don't even ever need to have a motive, correct?
Well, you're absolutely right in saying right now motive is irrelevant. Illinois law does not require that the prosecutor prove a motive in order to convict somebody of murder. However, we've always talked about whether or not this case should be charged as a federal hate crime. And for the feds to get in, the motive is really important. So they know that they have federal jurisdiction to try and add a murder case in federal court in this. So without a motive, I doubt that you're going to see the feds move in on this case. I think it's going to stay a Lake County, Illinois state murder case, and motive is irrelevant.
Okay, motive irrelevant on the state level, but if the feds are to be brought in, motive and one of hate would likely need to be established. Irv, thank you. Hang with us. Want to go now to another person who spoke. Of course, you heard briefly from a gentleman representing the mom and dad of the defendant. Then you heard briefly and just in an explanatory way from the Lake County State's Attorney Eric Reinhardt. His office will be handling this case in its totality. Also someone who spoke to the gaggle of reporters out front and to the microphones was a woman, a mother, who was at the parade July 4th this year. Was at the parade, and then, like many individuals from that immediate area, went to Washington, D.C. In an effort to get some legislative change. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
On July 4th, 2022, I took my son to the Highland Park 4th of July parade. It was going to be his first parade that he was walking in his life, and shortly after we got there, shots rang out that we thought were fireworks, and we ran for our lives. We didn't know what we were running from or who we were running from. We just ran, and at one point he gave up and threw himself on a hill and cried that he didn't want to die, and I had to get down with him and make him run until we found my husband and we were able to get in the car and get home to safety. Even though we did get home to safety, we found out later that the shooter his mother lived a block and a half from our house, and that while we were in our house sheltering in place, he was at her home a block and a half away getting his mother's car and continuing on to Madison. I'm here today because people from my community cannot be here. They're not ready. They are broken, living in fear, and I wanted to be here to be a presence for them, to be able to sit in the courtroom and know that my town, the people from my town matter, and what happened to them matters, and that we are here to make sure that justice is carried out. I have the utmost faith in Eric Reinhardt's office that he will bring down the hammer of justice on this defendant. For the last 3 weeks, I've traveled to Washington, D.C. This 3 weeks, every Wednesday for the last 3 weeks to pass a federal assault weapon ban. I was there when it went for markup through Congress for 12 hours. I sat and listened to lawmakers argue about it. I was in D.C. listening to our mayor give the most eloquent speech representing our town proudly. And I was there this last week when the bill, H.R. 1808, passed through the House and is now moving on to the Senate. And I will be back to fight in the Senate for that. Yeah, I was just going to finish up one more thing. And I go and I leave my family to do this because this shooter walked into a store and legally purchased this weapon, and within a matter of seconds shot off nearly 100 rounds and destroyed families and broke many parts of our community. And it will happen again if we don't pass a federal assault weapon ban. So if anyone out there is hearing this and they feel scared or mad or frozen, like they can't move, you can help. You can help us join this fight. You can help us pass a federal assault weapon ban, and we can prevent another shooting like this from happening again.
I'm sorry, what did the shooter do? One more time. I'm sorry, I missed it.
What did he do?
You said this shooter
And then you talked about the assault weapons ban. I just want to hear that again.
He walked into a store and purchased his weapon legally. He purchased it. Well, he didn't walk into a store. He bought it online. But the weapon was purchased legally, which is a problem.
What are your thoughts on his not guilty plea?
I think it's pretty standard for defendants to plead not guilty in an arraignment.
Ashby, you referred to those immediate moments following the shooting and your son throwing himself up on the ground and not wanting to go on. How is he doing emotionally now? How are you, trying to help him get through that experience?
I think he lost, like many other children in our community, he lost a huge part of his innocence. It's just not something you can get back. He worries when he goes somewhere if somebody's going to shoot him. He worries. He did not want to go downtown with friends. It took us weeks to get him to go down there. And I think all the kids in our community, even kids who weren't there, are suffering. It's not knowing where you can be safe is something that is like the foundation that we all build in our children and is now broken.
What was it like?
For me, I think the activism is my therapy right now. I think that's what I'm doing. I'm charging ahead and just trying to make sure that this doesn't happen to any other communities.
May I ask you, what was it like to actually see him? So you were sitting in back of him. Did you actually get a good view of him?
I mean, I saw the back of his head, and honestly, I tried not to look at him, if I'm being frank. I'm more focused on giving power and strength to our state's attorney and making sure that he feels our trust and encouragement in him.
What outcome would you like to see out of these criminal proceedings ultimately?
I would like to make sure or see that that the shooter never faces the light of day again, that he never walks free, that he never gets to be in the sun or be outside or be just a regular person again. I hope he stays in prison forever.
Federal charges should be picked up?
I do think federal charges should be picked up. I do.
Okay, Ms. Beasley, Highland Park mother who was there on July 4th with her young child, a witness to the terror that took place, terror that killed 7 individuals, dozens of other injured. Preliminary hearing for that shooter today. She was outside speaking really on behalf of herself and likely many others who were unable or still unable for a number of reasons to get out and speak publicly. But we know she was one of the mothers who also marched to Washington in hopes of making some type of mark legislatively when it comes to gun laws. And we know many are motivated there to do the same and keep that fight going. You also saw photographer, this happening in real time. You saw that rack focus. We zoomed off Miss Beasley there for a moment and racked our focus. I believe walking in the back there was the mother and the father of the shooter. That's when you saw the camera move. That was the mother and the father of the shooter. I certainly know then we had already heard from the other man they were walking with, who he says he has been retained by mom and dad to represent mom and dad. Again, mom and dad of the defendant. Dana Kozlov asking some critical questions, our CBS 2 political investigator. During the press conference, saw, I believe, mom and dad there. Dana, can you walk me through the moments that happened?
Yeah, I actually was in the courtroom for the hearing, Brad. I was one of 12 people who was reporters who were allowed to sit in the jury box. A couple other reporters were allowed in the actual courtroom seats. But his parents, Denise and Robert Crimo Jr., came in shortly before the hearing, the arraignment began, flanked by 2 different attorneys. They did not look around. They were very solemn. They looked straight ahead the entire time, and they did not speak to their son in the courtroom. And then after the very short hearing, it was less than 10 minutes really, they left while Ashby, who you just heard from, while Ashby was speaking, they left also with their attorneys and walked very quickly away. No desire to talk to anybody publicly at this time. And that's later when their attorney, who you've also heard from, George Gomez, spoke and took some questions from reporters. And as you know, his family, his parents have not said much, if anything, publicly since the July 4th shooting. And so we had a lot of questions for him. One of mine, it was, also, are you happy or are they content with allowing their son, the suspect, to be represented by a public defender? The answer was yes at this time. And I said, well, if they're still supporting their son, Mr. Gomez says the suspect's parents, of course, are shocked and they're devastated. They're cooperating with authorities. But then I asked, well, if they are still supporting their son as well, why not hire a private attorney for him? And he could not answer that. So yes, they were in court, and again, in what was a very short arraignment this afternoon, or this morning. Brad?
Okay, Dana, I want to keep you there for just a moment. I'm going to ask you a rather long-winded question here, of course, asking about hiring a private attorney. As we've talked with Eric Miller before, that could take a lot of money. And also, a private attorney can simply say no to this case. And as our legal Eric Miller says, he doesn't know many attorneys that would want to take on this case. Dana, we caught kind of the last couple minutes of George Gomez there. Again, he's the counselor. He is the attorney now representing the parents of the alleged Highland Park July 4th killer, attorney representing the parents. So did anyone ask, and I don't want to put you in a corner here, if it's a straight up no, it's no. Did anyone ask whether he had been retained in part because dad might have some legal culpability, because basically he vouched for his son. His son got the FOID card. That allowed him to legally buy the weapons he used to kill 7 and injure dozens of others. Did anyone ask about that legal aspect, or is George Gomez serving in more of a PR relations to basically get the press off the parents' back, so to speak?
Well, I can answer that in a couple of different ways, and I'm going to. Number one, George Gomez is a criminal defense attorney. So, yes, it was pretty clear that he has been retained on the off chance or the possibility that the suspect's father or mother somehow could be charged criminally in connection with the July 4th shooting. So, again, George Gomez, representing the parents, is a criminal defense attorney. I specifically asked Mr. Gomez if he believes that Robert Crimo Jr., the father, should in fact face charges. I mentioned to him that there are many people who have been highly critical of the fact that the suspect's father signed off on a FOID card that then allowed his son to purchase weapons legally after there had been warning signs that he perhaps had some mental health issues prior to buying weapons. And Mr. Gomez's answer to me was, in a nutshell, no, he doesn't believe that Mr. Robert Crimo Jr. the father should be charged criminally. I can't remember specifically how he worded it, but by my recollection, he basically said, he just signed off and then gave him permission to get the FOID card, but the FOID card was still approved by the state. Thereby, and again, I'm surmising this, thereby that responsibility or blame would not be on the suspect's father, but rather be on the state, because the state then still approved the card. That is my quick recollection of how that exchange went. And then somebody asked later, well, do you believe he will be charged? And Mr. Gomez said, I can't comment on that. And my belief was that he doesn't have any clear indication as to whether the father will or will not be charged in the future. Brad?
Okay. Dana Kozlov, always asking the right questions, our CBS 2 political investigator. And a good point there, and need to know that, is almost setting up an early defense. The defense is, hey, it's not the voucher's fault. It's ultimately the approver's fault. And who approved ultimately the FOID that allowed this young man to buy the weapons that allowed for this killing? Well, the state did that. So interesting insight there, Dana Kozlov. We will surely see you throughout the day, as this is topic A today. We appreciate you taking some time with us on the stream. Want to go back to Irv Miller, legal expert. Irv, now 40 or so minutes into our extended coverage of this procedural but critical and important hearing today. Any final takeaways, any things to be thought about, as now it appears we will wait until the November 1st court date as it is set?
And frankly, when we get to November 1st, you're not going to have a lot of news to report, because it's basically at that point in time the state's attorney's office handing over reports, FBI reports, Lake County Sheriff's reports, Highland Park Police Department reports. All those have to be turned over to the defendant prior to any discussion of the trial. In this case, and the next court appearance, I think, will be shorter than the 9-minute court appearance that you saw today. And if I could just comment about one other thing real quickly, put my old prosecutor's hat back on. I think that the attorney for the dad is concerned about one particular charge. That is that his client may have acted recklessly in signing that FOID application, allowing his son to get a gun. You don't have to commit a crime in Illinois intentionally. A crime could be committed in a reckless manner, and I think that's what he should be concerned about.
It's interesting. Irv, let's get into the weeds. What type of charge is that? Is it a misdemeanor? Is that a felony? What type of penalty could one face? I mean, basically, you're just saying he didn't wantonly vouch for someone he knew was going to do ill, but he should have done his homework, right, in essence?
Well, we don't know what information the dad had at the time he signed off on the FOID guarantee. I guarantee you that Lake County State's Attorney's Office knows as to what type of information he had, and was it a reckless act based upon that information? If indeed he had it, was it a reckless act to sign off on the FOID application? That's what I think is going through the minds of the Lake County State's Attorney's Office, as well as what the father's attorney may be trying to, protect his client from at this particular time.
Yeah, that is an interesting charge. Again, do you know what level of crime that is? And I mean, one would believe that's a rarely used charge, except for exceptional cases where one's voucher turns into something terrible, like happened in this case, July 4th. What type of charge is that? Do you even know? Or?
I think without knowing the facts of what the state's attorney's office knows, my guess would be that it would be a misdemeanor charge, but it would be, a criminal charge. And the misdemeanor does carry various sentences, anywhere from supervision to probation to up to a year in the county jail. So it's something that I think the father might have been wise to hire an attorney for, because I'm sure he doesn't want to put himself in that position.
Okay, so a misdemeanor charge. But we often know in cases like this, major headline cases, sometimes people are charged, and they have to be, to make a point. And if anyone wanted to make a point as to why that law is on the books, this would seem like an example. Irv Miller, our legal expert, we thank you for the past 45 minutes or so for taking us through this case. Again, the headline here, it was 9-minute proceeding, 10:59 to 11:08 if you want to come back to me. The charged is the Highland Park shooter on July 4th. It simply began as a parade, ended in terror there. 7 were killed. Of those, That equals now to rather 7 killed, 21 counts of first-degree murder, 117 counts all told, 48 counts of attempted murder for the 21-year-old, who was, some were surprised, some thought he might be seen via video from the county jail. He was actually present at court today. Slight in figure compared to the 3 others at his defense table. He spoke 14 different times, all concise. He said yes 12 times, no once, and he said his date of birth. It was a 9-minute procedural hearing, but as important as they get, the preliminary hearing there for the Highland Park shooter. Next court date will be on November 1st. We thank you for streaming with us now in this early afternoon hour. We thank our legal expert, Irv Miller, our CBS 2 political investigator, Dana Kozlov, for helping us out, and our crew behind the scenes. Now let's get back to the stream.